Part 10. I Can See the Laws of Things. Author, Yitiao Xuanhuan. Chapter 91. They suddenly realized how ironic their behavior at this moment was. The soldiers outside the city continued to sacrifice their lives to protect Jianghai City, but they are at this most critical moment. What I was thinking about was, escape. Jianghai City fell into boundless silence for a moment. Come on. I don't know who cried out, and everyone in the square turned to look at a girl in the crowd. The girl hugged her shoulders and cried and shouted at the live broadcast on the big screen in the square. That scene was like a bomb that exploded in everyone's hearts again. In the military camp, dozens of soldiers in military uniforms stood there, with determination to die on their faces. Tell me. Who are you? The officer standing in front of them shouted to them. We are from Kyushu, the soldiers roared. I didn't hear clearly. Tell me, who are you? The officer punched the wall suddenly, his eyes bloodshot. We soldiers from Kyushu, the soldiers shouted hysterically. The officer gritted his teeth and said with red eyes, yes. We are from Kyushu. We are soldiers. We are all iron-blooded men. Do you still remember the oath we swore under that flag? Those soldiers shouted, for the country, for the people, throw your heads and shed your blood. Always fight on the front line, never admit defeat, never back down. The officer suddenly clenched his fists and said with scarlet eyes. My warriors. It's time for us to fulfill our oath. Soldiers who have parents to support at home, come out to me, he shouted. No one goes out alone. Soldiers who have wives at home and have become fathers, come out for me, he shouted. Still no one came out. He suddenly took off his helmet, looked up to the sky and cried, turning towards the military camp. Let's go. Everyone, follow me. Boom. 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 Huge explosions resounded through the sky one after another, and dazzling light illuminated the sky one after another in the gap where the insects swarmed in. In the military camp, a child stood there, holding dozens of nameplates in his arms and crying loudly. The officer was his father. He grew up in a military camp, and he has witnessed the cruelty of this world since he was born. And now and into the future, he will continue to witness it. In the gaps in the defense line, dozens of soldiers roared and fought on the front line, fighting until the last drop of blood was shed. The officer roared suddenly and killed several mutants. His body staggered back. Countless parasites were crawling towards his body all over his body. He knew the time had come. Just like everyone who died here just now. They were all good people, and they deserved to die. And so does myself. They suddenly pressed their hands on their chests, and a life wheel appeared instantly, shining with extreme light. Sir! Sir! The soldiers around him shouted hysterically at him. The officer roared and used his last strength to rush towards the endless swarm of insects, the light in his body bursting to the extreme. Tell my son that his father died a worthy death. Everyone looked at that scene tremblingly. Countless people watched the scene with trembling eyes through the live broadcast. In the dark room, King Ian hugged her shoulders tightly and looked at the scene in the picture tremblingly. Tears fell from her eyes and wet the pillow on her chest. Is it necessary to use this method to defend their Jianghai city? Is it necessary to sacrifice countless people to make the insect swarm retreat? If gods really exist in this world. King Ian stared blankly at that scene, 2 lines of tears flowing from her eyes. Then please. End this. The sky was silent. Suddenly, a gust of wind blew past the faces of everyone present. It seemed that in the strong wind, the roar of the engine could be faintly heard. At that moment, under everyone's gaze, a black shadow fell from the sky and landed in front of the officer with a crash. A dark umbrella suddenly unfolded towards the countless insect swarms in the gap, and the rolling flames roared and enveloped hundreds of mutants in the gap. The officer only saw a pair of eyes shining with purple light. The next moment, the man's hand pressed down on his chest, and the already brilliant life wheel on his chest was forced back into his body by a force. At the same time, the officer tremblingly discovered that his already scarred body was recovering at an unimaginable speed. The wounds are healing and the fatigue is clearing. At that moment, he actually recovered to his peak. A gust of wind spread out with the man as the center, and the swarm of insects was blown away by the strong wind and flew out in the opposite direction. Within 100 meters, all insect swarms were swept away. The black umbrella closed slowly. Then he suddenly held it in his hand, and a terrible power wave instantly spread from his body. He faced the gap, with his back to everyone, and the wind blew his hair. He turned his head and looked at the soldiers behind him, his eyes red, and said, "You are all good. Jianghai City is lucky to have you. But you don't have to sacrifice anymore. Now, leave it to me." In an instant, the camera captured his face, and he instantly appeared in the live broadcast screen, seen by countless people. Even the live broadcast camera trembled slightly at the moment when the man appeared. Obviously, the crew who filmed it did not expect that such a huge change would occur at this moment. And when that man appeared in the live broadcast screen, the whole Jianghai city trembled. They knew this man. They had seen that man. Not long ago, the wizard who stood in the sky fought with the Grand Master above Jianghai city. A person who is so powerful that people can't imagine. Lin En. In Jianghai city, people trembled and murmured that name. Wan Koubei stood up suddenly, trembling as he looked at the live screen. In the room, King Ian stared blankly at the familiar figure in the live screen, and could hardly restrain herself from saying the two words that were deeply bound to her. "Brother." In the second line of defense. The officer looked at the man who fell from the sky tremblingly, and said, "Who are you?" Lin En gritted his teeth and said, "Lin En, like you, was once a soldier of Jianghai city." He stopped talking, but turned his head and looked at the countless swarms of insects that attacked the gap again. Under the gaze of everyone, he held the black umbrella and walked towards the endless swarm of insects step by step. A brilliant light suddenly burst out from his eyes, and he waved his hand towards the endless swarm of insects. In an instant, from the extreme east of the line of defense to the extreme west of the line of defense, a raging flame instantly burned, and the terrible flames formed a new line of defense outside the second line of defense again. In the dark night, the long stream of flames burst out with extremely dazzling light. Countless insects screamed miserably under the scorching flames and retreated madly. That's it," Lin En said with bloodshot eyes. "I can see the laws of things." Author, Yitiao Xianyue. Chapter 92. In an instant, this scene spread throughout the entire Kyushu region via live broadcast. Everyone in Jianghai city was detonated. They roared hoarsely at Lin En in the picture, and a surge of blood swept through their sanity almost instantly. They didn't know why they were so crazy or excited at this moment. But after seeing the defense line made of flames, they suddenly burst into tears. "Kill them! Kill them!" In the second line of defense, soldiers stood up one after another with help, tremblingly looking at the long stream of blazing flames outside. Tears suddenly surged and washed away the blood on his face. They were all fierce men. After seeing this scene, they could not help but burst into tears. "Quick! Chief Lin En bought us precious time. Everyone who can still move, take action immediately." The officer roared and rushed towards the huge gap. "Repair the gaps and reorganize the defense line. Now is the time for us to counterattack." Inside the defense line, all the soldiers gritted their teeth and rushed forward, moving away the corpses of the insect swarms one after another, and setting up defense points one after another. Their bodies were covered in blood, and some even had arms and legs broken, but at this time they still rushed forward without hesitation. Infect. Plague. Swarm. Go to hell. Almost at the same time, in the direction of Jianghai City. The soldier standing on the city wall suddenly looked towards the dark night in the north. The next moment, his face showed an indescribable trembling expression. In the dark night in the north, the roar of countless helicopters could be heard, and one light after another lit up throughout the dark night. Almost at the same time, Jianghai City's headquarters radio tower received one signal after another from the north. Call Jianghai City, call Jianghai City, please be ready to pick up the plane immediately. We are the advance troops of the northern Xuanhuan City. Under the orders of the Zhuzhou Territory Headquarters, we will support your department as soon as possible. Call Jianghai City. We are the support troops for your department from Qingcheng, Nanshan City, Piamiao City, Luodu, and Jiangbei City. We have already met in the wilderness 100 kilometers away from your department. Please coordinate immediately. We estimate that half arrive at your department within hours. Call Jianghai City. As soon as the Zhuzhou Territory Headquarters received the news, they formed a top-level combat support team of 200 masters as quickly as possible. They are heading to Jianghai City at full speed and are expected to arrive within an hour. Call Jianghai City. The Zhuzhou Domain Medical Organization Headquarters has urgently organized a group of chemical defense troops. They have taken a special plane to fly to your department. All the important cities in the Kyushu region have jointly sent a letter to your department. Please stick to it. We are on the way. In the main hall, I looked at the wireless letters sent from the north one after another. The eyes of Wan Kobayi and the other three grandmasters turned red. They gritted their teeth suddenly and stood up. Wan Kobayi suddenly wiped away the tears on his face, gritted his teeth and said solemnly, "Notify the entire city immediately and issue the highest level mobilization order. Evacuate the ordinary people in the city and let all warriors and mages who are willing to contribute to the protection of Jianghai City gather in Wudian Square. All coordination work must be done well." A staff member immediately stepped forward and said through gritted teeth, "Master Wang, the overseas live broadcast channel cut off the live broadcast signal 2 minutes ago, and the entire live broadcast website has been cancelled." Wan Kobayi suddenly stood up and roared ferociously. "The items are gone. Since they don't dare to broadcast live anymore, let's do it. Immediately notify Jianghai City TV station and open the Jianghai City Battle Situation channel. We provide military helicopters free of charge and let them go to the second line of defense with equipment to report the current battle situation. Revealed to the entire network as soon as possible." A grandmaster suddenly stood up and said through gritted teeth, "What about us?" Wan Kobayi tore off the clothes on his upper body and said with blood-red eyes, "Leave one grandmaster to take charge of the overall situation and coordinate the support troops of the friendly cities. Everyone else who can fight will come with me to the second line of defense." I'm ashamed of myself. Wan Kobayi put on his military uniform, gritted his teeth with a weapon in his hand, and walked out the door step by step. I actually have the honor to sit in this position. After this matter is over, I will submit my resignation from above, otherwise I will be sorry for the military uniform I once wore. Let's go to. The masters suddenly stood up, their eyes blood red. Jianghai City, above the high-rise building of Fei Group. Fei Wen just stood in front of the huge floor-to-ceiling window, lit a cigarette, frowned, and took out his mobile phone from his arms. "Hello, I'm Fei Wengang, how are your contacts with relevant departments? Tell them that the Fei Group is willing to provide any form of support for the war in Jianghaikan for free. The first step of a total of 50 million funds will be in place within 10 minutes when they are ready. Tell them that all my factories are willing to provide Jianghai City with all forms of help free of charge." Fei Wengang suddenly looked towards the long stream of blazing flames in the south, and suddenly clenched the phone in his hand. The entire Zhuzhou territory was mobilized immediately. Who could have imagined that after the live broadcast channel set up to retaliate against the Zhuzhou territory exposed the battle situation outside Jianghai City, the Zhou territory would make such large-scale arrangements and deployments in such a short period of time. Somewhere on the border of Vietnam, a man in black robe looked at the northern sky and murmured, "Is this the state machine of Zhou? If our country had such efficient action capabilities, how could so many people die?" They found out that they were wrong. They originally wanted to cause panic in the entire Zhou region and use this disaster to destroy the psychological defense line of that country in advance. But he found that he was really too naive. They thought that the people of Zhou would definitely react the same way as their country did when the disaster broke out, and the entire state machine was paralyzed in an instant, but now, the news they received was beyond their expectations. Then what should we do? A man behind him said bitterly. The man in the black robe raised his head and said, "If they can solve this disaster, it is God's will." He turned around suddenly and walked into the darkness. Our actions in Zhou have failed. In front of such a state machine, let alone a small fourth-level beast, even a world-class beast, what use is it? In the second line of defense, Lin An stood outside the long stream of blazing flames. The light in his eyes was extremely sharp and crazy. After cutting off the pollution of the river, he rushed to the second line of defense at the fastest speed. Along the way, he had also obtained the context of the whole incident through the internet. There was no large-scale infection in the south of Jianghai City, so where did this endless swarm of insects come from? Now there is no doubt. Those swarms of insects are the mutants derived from the millions of people infected in U state a month ago. As long as he thought that these swarms of insects were less than a few dozen kilometers away from Jianghai City, Lin An's heart was shrouded in waves of violent emotions. If these insects entered Jianghai City, what about my sister? As long as he thought of this possible thing, Lin An's heart could not help but surge with murderous intent. In an instant, the black umbrella in Lin An's hand burned with raging flames. He jumped over the long stream of flames and landed on the other side of the long stream of flames with a bang, facing the endless swarm of insects. The dense swarm of insects immediately sent out sharp hisses towards him. They were afraid of fire, but now Lin An's appearance immediately made all the insects determine the target of attack. If you look down from the sky, you can see that countless swarms of insects have launched a charge towards Lin An. Because of the narrow space, one covered another, and finally gathered into a huge wave of insects tens of meters high. The terrible screams resounded through the sky. Lin An suddenly raised his head and said solemnly, "You all have to die." You are listening to novels at Bless Up channel. Wish you happiness and luck. Please subscribe to receive new novels. How do you feel about this novel? Please like and leave a comment. I can see the laws of things. Author, Xuanhuan. Chapter 93. The next moment, he suddenly raised his hand to the sky. The tyrannical aura instantly spread out from his body, and one will of law after another revolved around him. Crack! A flash of lightning streaked across the sky. In the entire sky, dark clouds gathered instantly, and the wind was surging. The live broadcast staff of Jianghaikan TV station who were rushing over almost immediately captured the scene of the sky and earth changing color. The helicopter trembled violently in the airflow, and the reporter suddenly turned his head and said anxiously to the photographer, "Quick! Aim the camera in that direction immediately. Turn on the camera." On the internet, the number of people under Jianghaikan's live broadcast channel for the battle outside the city has climbed to 1 million in just 10 minutes, and this number is still soaring upward without a limit. The moment the picture appeared, the entire network was immediately detonated. In the camera, the war correspondent pointed to the direction of the long stream of flames on the second line of defense against the howling wind and shouted, "This is Jianghai TV station. We have rushed to the front line as soon as possible. What we are seeing now is the battle scene outside Jianghai City. Not long ago, when the second line of defense was about to be breached, a powerful mage appeared to turn the tide. He created that line of fire and blocked all the swarms of insects outside that line of defense. Since the mage joined the battlefield, the situation on the front line has been contained. And in just a few seconds, we got the news that the mage actually jumped over the line of fire he created and faced the attack of thousands of swarms of insects alone. We still have no way of knowing whether this sudden change in weather is also due to the magician's action. And just as he finished speaking, the camera suddenly captured an unimaginable picture. The reporter instantly showed an expression of disbelief, trembling. "Oh my God! What is that?" The camera zoomed in instantly, and saw that in the long stream of flames, countless swarms of insects gathered into a huge wave of tens of meters high, rushing towards the direction of the flame defense line. And at the moment when the huge wave gathered, a flash of lightning suddenly flashed across the sky, and fell on the huge wave of insects with a click. The huge wave of insects exploded instantly under the lightning, and countless insect corpses flew into the sky like fireworks. Even at the moment when the lightning appeared, the electronic equipment in the helicopter showed a burst of interference flashes. And in the next moment, the camera captured a figure in the collapsed huge wave. A man who soared into the sky, wrapped in rolling flames. It's him. It's the man who turned the tide on the second line of defense. He appeared. When seeing the man, even the reporter couldn't contain the excitement in his heart, and he shouted out with emotion. At that moment, the comments on the live broadcast channel were constantly refreshed at a rate of thousands per second. This scene was really too shocking. With thunder all over the sky, his whole body was surrounded by rolling flames, and countless insect swarms rushed towards the sky behind him. In Jianghai City, many people burst into tears instantly. In various cities in Zhuzhou Domain, men, women, young and old, either sat in front of the TV or gathered in the square, trembling as they watched the scene on the live screen. Before the support from the major cities in Zhuzhou Domain arrived, it was that man who took on the entire Jianghai city. Really, he was a line of defense alone. Come on! Come on! People were excited, clenched their fists tightly, and stared at the man in the live broadcast. I don't know who started it, and I don't know when, but on the square of Jianghai City, the crowds all raised their fists and shouted movingly to the man in the live broadcast. Come on! Come on! We must not lose. Not only in Jianghai City, but also in hundreds of cities in Zhuzhou territory, people gathered spontaneously on the square, and the overwhelming cheers gathered from the extreme north of Zhuzhou territory to the extreme south of Zhuzhou territory. This is the first time that people have been so moved by something since the revival of spiritual energy and the great changes in the world. And the next moment, in the live broadcast, the surging swarm of insects once again enveloped the man, and even the dark swarm of insects had covered the stream of flames emanating from his body. The moment this scene appeared, all the people in the entire Zhuzhou territory changed their faces and clenched their fists tightly. There are too many insects. There are really too many. And he is the only one. Is it true that the first person who stood up and turned the tide is really going to die on that battlefield? In the dark room, watching this scene, King Ian suddenly stood up and shouted with emotion. Brother! The next moment, a miraculous scene appeared. A huge explosion sounded, accompanied by a dazzling bright light. Even the people outside the screen seemed to be able to feel the rolling heat waves emanating from there. The countless insect swarms that surrounded Lin An were instantly blown apart again in the heat waves of the explosion. The reporter on the helicopter stood up excitedly and shouted. Oh my God! He broke through the encirclement, he came out. The entire Kyushu region was instantly detonated again, and people's encouraging shouts and excited roars rang out in hundreds of heavy cities. The number of people on the live broadcast channel has continued to soar and exceeded the 10 million mark. Some elderly people even fainted because of the great excitement. Because of the rapid spread of information brought by the internet, many people have already known the name of the man who is fighting a desperate battle with the swarm of insects. Lin En. Countless people shouted that name, one heavy city after another. The next moment, in the picture, Lin En dragged a long stream of flames to fly higher in the sky. He stopped, turned around suddenly, faced the countless crazy swarms of insects rushing towards him, and then stretched out his hand. "Let the rain," he said softly, "let it rain." His hand suddenly clenched into a fist. In an instant, the sky was surging, and the torrential rain swept towards the entire earth like a waterfall. The entire land was covered by dense rainstorms. At that moment, the sky was silent. In the boundless silence, his ethereal voice came again. "Burn." The scene at that moment can no longer be described in words. At this moment, no adjective can describe the shocking scene captured by the camera. The raindrops in the sky burned the whole sky. In an instant, the rain was transformed into burning rain, filling the entire wasteland within the field of vision. People can even see the endless swarm of insects illuminated by the rain of fire burning all over the sky. The next moment, heavy rain fell. The flames burned all over the field. It was like a divine punishment. On the helicopter, the reporter was stunned, and the microphone in his hand fell at his feet. The photographer raised his head in shock and looked at the burning sky. The soldiers in the second line of defense raised their heads one by one, and the firelight reflected on their shocked cheeks. In hundreds of heavy cities, everyone was shocked by the scene. The next moment, the brief silence merged into shouts and roars to the sky. "God! God! God! He must be a god! He must be a god of the heavens! Oh my God! What on earth did I see today? What on earth did I see?" King Ian covered her mouth, looking at the burning sky in the picture in shock, and said excitedly, "Brother! I have always believed that you are invincible. No one in this world can do this except you. The Supreme Council of Jiuzhu Territory." Chen Daoming sat at the first seat with his shoulders folded, with a mysterious smile on his face. He looked at the representatives of the major families sitting in front of the conference table one by one with interest, and looked at the shocked expressions of several world-class magic gods sitting not far from him, and smiled faintly. "Haven't you always wanted to know who the heaven-level venerable of my Chen family is? Now, you have got what you want. I can see the laws of things." Author, Yitiao Xuanhuan. Chapter 94. The rain of fire that filled the sky almost became the turning point of this battle. The people from Jianghai City TV station had already arrived at the second line of defense by helicopter. One piece of news after another from the front line quickly spread across the entire network. "A miracle, it's simply a miracle. The insect swarm outside the second line of defense has been completely contained by that godlike man. The latest news from the front, Lin En has advanced 500 meters to the south. The soldiers of the second line of defense in Jianghai City have also left the second line of defense and are clearing out the fish that have slipped through the net. Further news reports, that man has once again advanced the line of defense to the south by 1 kilometer, and the insect swarm has shown a trend of collapse. Report. The insect swarm collapsed, and the man pushed the line of defense to the south by 5 kilometers in one fell swoop. Report. The line of defense has further advanced 10 kilometers to the south. Report. The soldiers of Jianghai City have successively recovered the third and fourth lines of defense that were previously broken by the insect swarm. It is expected that in 10 minutes, the soldiers of Jianghai City will be able to recover the fifth line of defense of Jianghai City that was first breached. One report after another caused an uproar in the entire Jiuzhu domain like a stimulant. This is a victory, a real victory for all the people in Jianghai City. But many people who know the truth are not completely relieved. Bai Qi, who had already followed Lin En to the second line of defense, looked solemnly at the burning sky in the south. Lin Zheng had already been completely impressed by Lin En's miraculous means, and his voice was almost hoarse from shouting. "Team leader Bai. We won. We contained the insect swarm. Commander Lin En is really too powerful. Lin Zheng was like a child seeing his heroic father, dancing with excitement. Bai Qi bit her lip and frowned worriedly. We can't be too happy now. Lin Zheng was startled and said, Why, what happened? Bai Qi raised his head and said solemnly. The pathogen that caused all these disasters, the real master of the insect swarm, has not appeared yet. Almost at the same time, at the forefront. Lin En slowly fell from the sky. He suddenly knelt on one knee on the ground, gasping for breath, drops of blood dripping from his eyes to the ground. The people outside only saw the glorious victory, and his invincible figure standing in the sky. However, controlling such a large area of laws and controlling such a large area of fire rain also put a huge burden on his body. Not to mention, this control took more than half an hour. The Kylan Jade Heart on his chest has also absorbed too many souls in the killing, and now it is scarlet and almost black. The Kylan Jade Heart has entered a saturated state. At least during this period of time, it can no longer absorb souls. How many have been killed? It is already incalculable. Lin En has controlled the speed at which the Kylan Jade Heart replenishes his mental power. If all the soul power in the Kylan Jade Heart is released in an instant, it may not only fail to train his soul, but will destroy his soul. It has almost reached the limit. Lin En staggered to his feet, his eyes were a little blurry. He suddenly constructed a will of life and hid himself, allowing the fatigue of his body to slowly recover. This kind of fatigue is not only physical fatigue, but also fatigue from the eye of law. This kind of fatigue cannot be recovered in a short time. At this moment, the sound of the engine roared behind him. Lin Zheng and Bai Qi rushed over. When they saw Lin En's appearance at this moment, their faces changed instantly. Lin Zheng hurriedly supported Lin En's body and trembled. Captain Lin En, how are you? Lin En took a deep breath and said, I'm fine, but my body is a little overloaded, and I will be fine soon. Bai Qi hurriedly stopped Lin En from standing up, quickly took out the medical kit, and said seriously. Don't move, I'm a doctor, I'll help you check. She immediately wiped the blood outside Lin En's eyes with gauze. When she saw his eyes, Bai Qi couldn't help but tremble, because at this moment she found that at this moment, there was almost no white in Lin En's eyes, and the pupils were filled with indescribable purple light. What kind of eyes are these? She immediately took out a sterilized cotton swab, gently pulled open Lin En's eyelids, and helped him wipe the blood accumulated next to his eyeball. But the moment she brought the cotton swab close to the purple eyes, the cotton swab suddenly disintegrated completely without any warning. The cotton swab seemed to collapse at the molecular level, disappearing and disintegrating bit by bit. Even the indescribable power of collapse began to spread along the cotton swab to her fingers. Bai Qi's face changed drastically. Lin En grabbed her wrist, closed his eyes, and said, Okay, you don't need to deal with my eyes, just help me up. Lin En also saw the power of collapse that spread to Bai Qi just now. Because from the perspective of the eye of law, the power of collapse is very special. The moment the cotton swab approached his eyes just now, he clearly saw the will of law on the cotton swab quickly collapse and disintegrate. This is the first time this has happened. But it seems that it has no effect on his body. Perhaps this is a protective measure derived from the eye of law after it was overused. I will study it carefully later. Give me gauze, Lin En shouted. Lin Zheng quickly tore off a piece of gauze and handed it to Lin En. Lin En closed his eyes and quickly wrapped the gauze around his eyes. Before the power of collapse completely disappeared, it was better not to use the eye of law again. Who knows if he will be unable to control it if he continues to use it. Lin En turned his head and said with his eyes closed. I need to rest, let's go back. But the moment he finished the sentence, a clear roar suddenly came from the dark night sky, which made the land within dozens of kilometers tremble. Creaking. The sound sharply cut through the entire sky in an instant. The next moment, Sharp barbs suddenly grew out of the ground one after another, spreading madly from the darkness to their location. The speed was so fast that even the naked eye could not catch it. Puff! Puff! One spike after another penetrated the ground, and almost in the next second, they were in front of them. Lin En's expression was stern, and he suddenly stretched out his hand in that direction. The power of the law surged out, and instantly constructed a will of rules in his hand. But the next moment, Lin En's expression changed slightly. A huge change that no one expected occurred. The moment he constructed the will of law, the will suddenly cracked like glass for some inexplicable reason. With a click. He could even clearly hear the crisp sound when the will of law collapsed. The will of law he constructed turned into countless fragments and completely disintegrated. And at the moment when the will of law shattered, even part of the will of law that existed in the world around it was affected at the same time. In the range of a few meters, within a few meters of the shattered will of law, the law that maintained the existence of air collapsed, the law that maintained the existence of land collapsed, the flow of wind collapsed, and the law of gravity collapsed. At that moment, a realm without any rules was formed in front of him. An area of absolute silence. I can see the laws of things. Author, Yitiao Xianyue. Chapter 95. Lin was not left with any time to think. In almost that 0.01 second, countless ground thorns rushed towards him. It was like an evil ghost crawling out of hell, roaring at Lin En for his life. Lin En could even feel the threat of death approaching. But at that moment, the moment countless earth thorns stepped into the law-collapsed field in front of Lin En, all the earth thorns collapsed without warning. It was like a piece of paper brought close to a burning flame. Just like when the cotton swab in Bai Chi's hand came close to his eyes. The thorns that pierced through the ground were completely destroyed in that moment. And almost at the same time, 2 streaks of scarlet blood flowed out of Lin En's closed eyes. The moment that drop of blood fell on the ground, all the laws on the ground collapsed. There was an unprecedented drastic change in his eyes. An indescribably terrifying force, a force that can cause the laws to collapse. Just when he used the eye of law to its limit, it appeared without warning. But at the next moment, 2 shrill screams came instantly. Poof! Poof! Lin turned his head suddenly, and the expression on his face changed. A barb penetrated Bai Chi's shoulder and lifted her directly off the ground. Her face was still incredibly pale, her pupils dilated instantly, and her long hair was swept by the strong wind. Leaning back, Lin Zheng's body still maintained that stiff posture, but the 2 ground thorns pierced his abdomen and chest straightly, and his eyes trembled like duckweed in the wind. Only the ground thorns attacking Lin En disappeared, but the ground thorns attacking Lin Zheng and Bai Chi were not affected. It appeared. Endless strong winds swept in, accompanied by footsteps that sounded like they came from hell. A huge black shadow. Under the cover of the dark night, the mother of insects, with countless tentacles and barbs growing on her body, emerged as a silhouette of nothingness in the dark night. A violent emotion and a rolling murderous intent swept through Lin's heart. This scene stirred up memories buried deep in his heart that had been sealed for 2 years. 2 years ago, the same scene. In the last mission, under the attack of the ferocious beast without warning. In this way, the comrades who fought alongside him closed their eyes permanently in front of him. He could even clearly remember the despair as blood gushed out from their mouths. It seemed that in an instant, time sent him to 2 years ago. The moment when his legs were disabled, the scene of blood splattering was still vivid in his mind. In an instant, Lin suddenly turned his head and looked into the deepest part of the darkness. That violent emotion and the rolling murderous intent swept through Lin's heart. The gauze over his eyes instantly disintegrated, and a hint of ferocity flashed across his face. Die. The moment that word came out of his throat, he opened his eyes of law again. And the moment he opened his eyes, the purple light in his eyes completely disappeared. In the deepest part of his pupils, a collapsing force, like a fountain of blood rushing out of hell, instantly occupied his eyes. The entire pupil. The next moment, his pupils suddenly dilated. In an instant, wherever he could see, the wheels of law existing between heaven and earth shattered one after another. The terrifying power of disintegration spread from his feet to the distant dark night in an instant. In the darkness, a shrill scream suddenly came out. Half of the body of the huge black shadow collapsed with a click like broken glass. At this moment, it seemed as if the world had collapsed. Huge shock still remained on Bai Chi's face. Lin Zheng gritted his teeth and rushed towards Lin An with a roar. 10 minutes later, when the soldiers on the second line of defense and hundreds of masters from the Kyushu region who had come for support arrived, everyone was shocked by the scene they saw. They raised their heads with pale faces and murmured. What is this? I saw everything from the sky to the earth. As if it had been cut open entirely, a huge chasm appeared. In that chasm, there was no air, no soil, no matter, nothing even the sound could pass through. Heaven and earth seemed to have collapsed in the gap. In the dark night, the engine of the off-road vehicle rumbled. Lin Zheng, who was pale, gritted his teeth, held the steering wheel, and drove the off-road vehicle crazily towards the south. In the rear compartment, Bai Chi covered the wound on her shoulder that had been simply bandaged, panting and holding the unconscious Lin An as she sat on the car seat. Lin An's eyes have been rewrapped with gauze, but you can vaguely see the blood flowing from the corners of the eyes, staining the gauze red. At this moment, the female body was chasing them crazily behind them. That terrible roar was getting closer and closer. Lin Zheng gritted his teeth and said with red eyes, "Why don't we move towards the north?" Bai Chi covered her wound and gasped, "We can't lead the mother body to the north. The north is Jianghai City. Almost all the soldiers on the second line of defense have been infected. Once the mother body gets close, the infection in those soldiers will accelerate. The mutation will probably cause a truly terrifying mutation." Lin Zheng said tremblingly, "Didn't you say that the mother body is a level 4 ferocious beast? The news has said that a top-level combat team composed of hundreds of masters from the Kyushu region has arrived to support it. They must have theirs away." Bai Chi gritted her teeth and said, "I'm afraid it is no longer a level 4 ferocious beast." Lin Zheng suddenly turned his head and said, "What did you say?" Bai Chi trembled, "It has been evolving. When we met it in Yu Kingdom 2 months ago, it was only a level 3 regional beast. After destroying an important city, it successfully advanced to level 4. A super beast. But look at its power just now." A flash of fear suddenly flashed in her eyes, and she said, "I'm afraid it has evolved to the 5th level now." As soon as these words came out, Lin Zheng felt waves of depression and trembling in his heart. A 5th level ferocious beast, what does that mean? It was a terrifying existence that could easily cause the destruction of more than 10 important cities. Once such a ferocious beast appears, it will take at least 2 digits of Grand Masters to kill it. If it really went to Jianghai City. Lin Zheng suddenly felt a wave of trembling. Bai Chi gasped, "No matter what, we must not let the situation that was finally contained get out of control again, otherwise, everything Lin An has done before will be meaningless." She lowered her head and looked at Lin's cheek, who was lying on her lap, then slowly reached out her hand and squeezed his hand. The force just now caused the 5th level insect mother to instantly collapse half of her body. Horrible beyond imagination. "Lin, who are you?" What no one noticed was that the Kylan jade heart on Lin An's chest emitted waves of warmth and slowly entered Lin An's body. The pure spiritual power that had absorbed countless souls and transformed it was nourishing his soul bit by bit at this moment and restoring his mental fatigue. During his coma, his mental power soared at an unimaginable speed. Faintly, the boundary has been touched. The limits of the legendary master. When he was not a grandmaster, he was already able to fight against the great grandmaster. So, what if he reaches the rank of a legendary grandmaster? then how terrifying his power will become. You are listening to Novels at Bless Up channel. Wish you happiness and luck. Please subscribe to receive new novels. How do you feel about this novel? Please like and leave a comment. I can see the laws of things. Author, Xuanhuan. Chapter 96. Boom. With the powerful engine of the off-road vehicle suddenly flew over a small hillside under the driving of Lin Zheng. The moment the off-road vehicle landed, Bai Qi suddenly saw a huge black shadow appearing in the night behind them. Along with the angry and shrill screams, the entire sky rumbled and trembled. Lin Zheng gritted his teeth and said, "It's already catching up. What should we do? What should we do?" Bai Qi suddenly turned her head, looked forward, gritted her teeth and said, "Ahead is the Sanjiang Bridge. After crossing the bridge, there is the highway. The insect mother has been seriously injured now. It is absolutely impossible for it to catch up with us on the highway. As long as we can drag Lin An to wake up, then everything will turn around." Lin Zheng covered his bleeding abdomen, bit his pale lips, and said, "I listen to you." The off-road vehicle kept galloping forward, but the next moment, there was a sudden break, and the off-road vehicle suddenly stopped. Lin Zheng's face instantly turned pale. Bai Qi hurriedly said, "What's wrong?" Lin Zheng said tremblingly, "We are finished." Just in front of the bridge, one after another of scrapped cars was seen blocking the bridge, and above the bridge, in the dark night, one mutant after another made a terrifying scream. "The road ahead is blocked. How could this happen? Are we destined to die here today?" Bai Qi said with a pale face. Lin Zheng suddenly tightened his grip on the steering wheel, looked ahead tremblingly, and said, "No. No. I can never let Chief Lin An die here. Even if I die myself, I can never let Chief Lin An die here." He roared suddenly and stepped on the accelerator. The off-road vehicle was under his control and flew towards the bridge crazily. One after another, the burning cars were directly knocked away by the strong power of the off-road vehicles. A huge crash, accompanied by countless sparks, emerged on the bridge. One after another, the mutants were knocked out by the impact of the off-road vehicle, and their shrill screams resounded through the sky. The next moment, the off-road vehicle crashed in front of several scrapped cars, unable to take another step forward. Lin Zheng punched the steering wheel and shouted, "Damn it! Damn it!" The off-road vehicle stalled, and at this most critical moment, this happened again. At this point, there is nothing we can do. "Let's get off the car," Bai Qi said with a pale face. He kicked the car door open, and together with Bai Qi, helped the unconscious Lin An out of the car, and ran staggering along the chaotic bridge towards the other side of the river. The mutants on the bridge were immediately attracted by the smell of blood on their bodies and surrounded them crazily. Lin Zheng endured the severe pain in his abdomen, grabbed a crowbar on the ground, screamed and hit the head of a mutant that rushed towards him. Snap! There was a loud noise, and the mutant was knocked away. Lin Zheng was panting and half kneeling on the ground, looking at the densely packed mutants surrounding him, his pupils trembling more and more. This is already a fatal situation. Just like during the day, when the insect swarm broke out in Sanjiang town, everyone was going to die, but it was the sudden appearance of Chief Lin An that changed that ending. But now Chief Lin An is still in a coma. In other words, no one can smooth it all out at this critical moment. Bai Qi supported her as she staggered towards the other side of the bridge. She gasped and suddenly realized that Lin Zheng had not followed. She turned her head suddenly and saw Lin Zheng kneeling there, trembling all over. "Lin Zheng," Bai Qi said anxiously, "what are you doing?" "Let's go. Let's go." Lin Zheng said tremblingly, "We can't escape. Even if we cross this bridge, we have no way to escape from their siege, and the insect mother is coming soon. We don't have Chief Lin An that kind of power, we really shouldn't come here, we can't escape." "That's right. There is no escape, this is already a certain death situation. No matter how hard you struggle, you can't change the destined outcome. At this time, there was a snap. Bai Qi slapped him in the face, grabbed his collar, gritted her teeth and stared at him, saying, "I really misjudged you, and Lin misjudged you too. Have you forgotten what you just said in the car? You said that you would not let Chief Lin die under any circumstances. Before you they say you've changed your ways, but now it seems you haven't changed at all. You are still that deserter. That coward. If you want to wait for death, then just stay here by yourself." Bai Qi suddenly turned around, supported the unconscious Lin En, gritted her teeth, and staggered towards the other side of the bridge. Lin Zhang slumped on the ground, turned his head and looked at the two figures slowly walking away with trembling eyes. Deserter, coward. Have you really changed nothing? Was everything he had done before just to show off to Commander Lin En? In fact, I have not changed at all from the bottom of my heart. I am still the miserable deserter who will lose his mind in an instant in the face of disaster. Drops of tears fell to the ground. No, that's not right. He suddenly clenched the crowbar in his hand, wiped the tears from his face with his sleeve, stood up with sobs, and trembled. I changed, Commander Lin En said that he has a new look at me. I'm not a deserter, I'm not a coward. I'm a person who is looked at with admiration by Commander Lin En. He held the crowbar tightly in his hand, facing the swarm of insects rushing in the dark night. 2 lines of tears dripped down his cheeks and fell to the ground. He murmured. I said I would never let Commander Lin En die here. Even if I die, I will never let Commander Lin En die here. I said it, I clearly said it. He suddenly wiped the tears from his eyes, looked at the swarm of insects with red eyes, gritted his teeth, looked at the countless swarms of insects with sobs, and cried. I said it. The next moment, he roared and charged at the swarm of insects. The crowbar in his hand hit the head of a mutant with a bang, and blood splattered everywhere, but in an instant, countless insect swarms completely submerged his body in the darkness. I said it. The hysterical voice rumbled in the night sky. On the other side of the bridge, Bai Qi, who was supporting Lin En, suddenly paused, then clenched her hands tightly, and a tear fell to the ground with a plop. But she didn't look back. She knew that it would be useless if she was not controlled by emotions. They are in great danger now. Lin En Bai Qi bit her lip, wiped the moisture from her eyes, and said. We will be fine, as long as we go to the forest and hide temporarily. The insect mother will definitely not be able to find us. As long as you wake up, you are still the god who curbed the entire insect swarm alone. She gritted her teeth, supported Lin En, and walked into the forest. Blood dripped from her shoulders. I can see the laws of things. Author, Yitiao Xuanhuan. Chapter 97. Quick. Quick. A few minutes later, on the highway, one after another of the damaged off-road vehicles and Hummers rushed towards the bridge. An officer sitting on the front Hummer suddenly stood up, picked up the infrared telescope, looked towards the bridge in the north, suddenly spit out the grass roots in his mouth, and shouted. Soldiers of Sanjiang town. Speed up, as long as we clear the swarm of insects on the bridge in front, we will open the main road to Jianghai City. Tell me, are you afraid? The soldiers behind raised their fists and roared, even the great god Lin En is not afraid. We are afraid of nothing. Yu Haoming's face suddenly broke into a passionate smile. Not long ago, they watched the thrilling battle outside Jianghai City through the only TV in the town. When they saw their commander Lin En alone pushing the entire Jianghai City defense line for dozens of kilometers, the soldiers in the whole town were climaxing. They are now the only group of warriors who are completely immune to those parasites. Moreover, after drinking the water that can cure the plague, their physical strength is no longer the same as before. Yu Haoming suddenly turned his head, looked in the direction of the bridge, and shouted. What are we waiting for? Speed up. Yes. A few minutes later, they came to the outside of the bridge. But in an instant, Yu Haoming's face changed drastically, and he shouted. Stop. The convoy immediately stopped by the bridge, and Yu Haoming jumped out of the Hummer and looked at the other side of the bridge solemnly. There was a strong smell of blood in the air, and it was obvious that a fierce battle had just happened here not long ago. Turn on the high beam, Yu Haoming said solemnly. He felt that there was danger ahead. In an instant, the high beams of more than a dozen cars shone on the bridge. The next moment, when he saw the scene in the distance, Yu Haoming's face changed instantly. On the bridge, there were countless mutants and insect corpses lying densely. Those mutants were obviously dead not long ago, and they could even see the blood spreading from those corpses. And among the countless mutant corpses, he saw a person. A person whose whole body was almost stained with scarlet blood, holding a twisted crowbar in his hand, standing there like a rock. Yu Haoming looked at the figure vigilantly. Did he kill so many insects here alone? Let's go and see, Yu Haoming said solemnly. He led dozens of soldiers and approached the bloody figure with great caution. When they were about 50 meters away from the figure, they stopped, and Yu Haoming shouted vigilantly. I am Yu Haoming, the captain of the 1st Brigade stationed in Sanjiang Town, Jianghai City. Who are you? He suddenly saw the motionless figure tremble. Then he slowly turned his head, revealing a pair of bloody empty eyes. Yu Haoming's face changed drastically, and he blurted out, Lin Zheng. It's you. How come you are here? He never thought that this man covered in blood was actually Lin Zheng. He wanted to rush over immediately. But the next moment, a very strange sound suddenly came from the air. Squeak squeak. It was as if something was about to break out of the body, as if something terrible was eager to break through the restraint of the skin. The next moment, there was a puff. Yu Haoming's face changed drastically, and he saw the skin on Lin Zheng's back suddenly cracked, and one after another huge spider-like limbs broke out from Lin Zheng's back. The bloody red blood on his body seemed to be swallowed by something, and quickly disappeared from his body. He stood there naked. Even the mucus and blood of the mutants flowing out of the insects under his feet were swallowed into his body bit by some inexplicable force. Yu Haoming looked at the scene tremblingly, and stepped back. What's going on, Lin Zheng? What's wrong with you? Lin Zheng turned his head, looked at him blankly, and murmured. Captain Lin En and team leader Bai Qi went to the forest. You go find them, it will be here soon, I will stop it. Yu Haoming looked at him fearfully, and said, What did you say? Captain Lin En? What is it? Lin Zheng murmured blankly. Tell Captain Lin En for me that Lin Zheng will not be a deserter this time, he has changed. Just as he finished that sentence, a sharp cry that resounded through the sky suddenly came from the north bank of the bridge. Squeak. The moment that the sound sounded, the whole land was rumbling and shaking, and the soldiers behind Yu Haoming were instantly shaken by the terrible sound and suddenly vomited blood. In the eyes of everyone in fear, a huge black shadow slowly appeared on the north bank of the bridge. Every time it took a step forward, the ground was rumbling and shaking. It was like a destroyer, a demon crawling out of hell. Yu Haoming trembled and retreated, saying, That is. Lin Zheng slowly turned his head and looked at the huge black shadow that was getting closer and closer. His eyes were so empty, he stretched out his hand towards the turbulent river, and whispered. You, leave. The next moment, the rolling river water suddenly rolled up huge waves, submerging the entire bridge. Yu Haoming and his companions were horrified to see that the rolling river water was no longer clear, but as red as blood. At the moment when the waves swept the entire bridge, they even faintly heard the low hum of countless dense insects in the rolling scarlet waves. Quick! Retreat! Yu Haoming turned suddenly and ran towards the south bank with a roar. At that moment, the entire bridge began to decay rapidly under the influence of the scarlet waves, as if it was swallowed by something. With a loud bang, the entire bridge was instantly turned into ruins in the huge waves, and Lin Zheng's figure disappeared in the rolling waves. It was from this moment on. The Insect King, who would be called the first warrior under Lin En in the future, took the first step on his legendary road. Many years later, whenever people mentioned the legendary generals under Lin En, they could not avoid him, because he was the first to be loyal to Lin En, and the only cold-blooded person who fully implemented Lin En's orders, a real killing machine. Many people said that he had no feelings, but only a few people knew that he turned all his feelings into loyalty and gave it to the person he had feared all his life. Unswerving until death, never changed. Yu Haoming crawled up and stood trembling on the shore, looking at the long river. A rushing scarlet river. Even faintly, even the blood in their bodies seemed to be agitated, as if it was about to leave the body. The soldier behind him trembled and said, "What is that?" Yu Haoming turned his head suddenly, gritted his teeth, and said solemnly, "I don't know, but I know that there is no use for us to stay here. Commander Lin En has obviously had some changes. We will go to the forest immediately. No matter what, we must find Commander Lin En. No matter what. I can see the laws of things." Author, Yi Tiao Xian Yue. Chapter 98. In the dark forest. In the damp hollow of a big tree, Bai Qi gritted her teeth and quickly covered the hole with dead vines and leaves. She took out a small glass bottle from her arms and sprinkled the powder in the glass bottle little by little on the long path they walked into the tree hole. The powder in that bottle exuded an extremely pungent smell, and it was obviously a medicinal powder that could drive away wild beasts. She quickly walked into the tree hole and quickly helped Lin En, who was leaning against the wall of the hole. "Lin, Lin," she called softly, but there was no response. She had already checked and found that there were no wounds on Lin's body. A large part of the reason why he was in a coma should be due to something wrong with his mind and soul. "I'm sorry." Bai Qi's low, choking voice could be heard faintly in the tree hole. "It's my fault, it's all my fault. If it weren't for my fault, this plague should have been contained when it was in you, and then the current disaster would never have happened." Her tears pattered to the ground. "I have never told anyone that the insect mother is not naturally produced at all. It is artificially created and will be used as a biological matrix for future wars. I have also not told anyone that the insect mother is using my genes. Bread." She hugged her knees tremblingly and said, "I told you before that I have a quarter of you blood in my body. That's because my father is from you. At the same time, he is an internationally renowned biological expert. He is noble and kind, but only I knew what a crazy soul lay beneath my father's glamorous exterior. 20 years ago, during an archaeological operation after his spiritual energy was revived, he accidentally obtained a genetic sample that was hidden in the ruins and may have been countless years old." Her whole body was trembling, her eyes were empty, and only her lips were moving unconsciously. In this damp tree hole, it was obvious that her spirit had gradually reached the edge of collapse. She didn't know if Lin could hear it, but she knew that if she didn't tell all this, she might collapse now. She murmured, "Ever since he got that gene sample, my father seems to have become a different person and has devoted himself crazily to researching that gene. But at the beginning, I vaguely felt something was wrong with that genetic sample, because it seemed to be alive. After many years of cultivation by my father, it actually grew from a small drop of mucus to an embryo. Then, my father became more and more crazy. In order to test the power of the embryo, he began to use living animals for experiments. At first, it was just some kittens and puppies. In the end, he gradually became dissatisfied with using animals for testing. He began to use despicable methods to trick people one after another. Men, women, old people, children, after they came, they never left his laboratory. As if thinking of extremely painful memories, she buried her head in her knees and sobbed softly. Originally, it didn't matter. If it continued like this, it wouldn't matter even if my father kept ignoring me. However, due to an accident, my father exposed the embryo to the air. As a result, the embryo became too huge. The reaction exploded. When I was only 7 years old, I stood there stupidly, contaminated by the mucus that was splashed when the embryo exploded. Who would have thought that I would become the only person who did not have any negative effects on the genes of that embryo? Rejection people. And for the next 5 years, I was treated as a subject of experiments by my father, and I never left his laboratory. No matter how much I shout, how much I cry, how much I beg for mercy, it's all of no use. Bai Chi turned her head and looked at Lin An's side face, with 2 lines of tears flowing out of her red eyes. My father told me like that. He said that I was the child chosen by the gods of the previous era. He said that what he got was the god's gene. As long as I can successfully integrate that gene into my body, in the future, I am God. Bai Chi's trembling white fingers slowly opened the zipper on her chest. At the position of her collarbone, the corner of a scarlet life wheel slowly lit up with a faint light in the dark night. Bai Chi looked at the life wheel in her body and sobbed. His experiment succeeded, but also failed. When I was 12 years old, under his torture, I almost 100% integrated the genes of the so-called old gods. But he would never have thought that in the upcoming when it is perfectly integrated, I will awaken my life wheel at that moment. This is my life wheel, a life wheel that is different from all humans in this era, and also a life wheel with fatal flaws. She raised her head, slowly approached Lin En, stretched out her slender hand, and gently touched his eyes. Her eyes were particularly sad. Just like the power you just used, Lin, do you know how shocked I was when I saw that scene? The laws are collapsing, matter is collapsing, and wherever you look, everything is reduced to nothingness. But you don't know, I also have this kind of power. My life wheel is the Hankai wheel. It can only be used once in a lifetime. Once used, myself and all the materials around me will be completely reduced to nothingness, just like what you just did. Moreover, many times, even I can't control this destructive force. She curled up again and said. That was the moment my life wheel awakened. The aftermath of my life wheel destroyed the home that had imprisoned me for 5 years. I was saved, and my father was finally captured by Interpol. Regarding that, all the information about the genetic fragment was destroyed in that explosion, but I know that I am the continuation of that genetic sample in this world. I thought that this incident was finally over. After I was rescued, I tried hard to forget my childhood experiences and tried to grow up like a normal girl. This way, it has been 10 years. I gradually became famous in the medical field, and finally, with my hard work, I joined an international medical organization step by step. I traveled to various countries in the world and was involved in various medical research. Until a few months ago, I returned to arrived at U Kingdom. She raised her head, with a hint of fear in her eyes. At the beginning, our medical organization received the news that an unprecedented plague had appeared in the country of U, and had gradually caused infections in several small towns. We accepted the request of the country of U and brought the most advanced equipment to I arrived at the front line of the plague outbreak in Vietnam, but right there, you know who I met. She covered her painful cheek and trembled. Yes, it's that devil. I always thought he was serving his sentence in an international prison, but in fact he had long been rescued by a secret organization in Vietnam through various means. It was also from his mouth that I learned that that organization had been committed to researching an anti-human weapon, a biological weapon that can bring them huge benefits. And the researcher of that weapon is my father. You are listening to Novels at Bless Up channel. Wish you happiness and luck. Please subscribe to receive new novels. How do you feel about this novel? Please like and leave a comment. I can see the laws of things. Author, Xuanhuan. Chapter 99. He invited me to visit his research base in an ostentatious manner, allowing me to see the pathogen that caused all subsequent disasters, the prototype of the insect mother. He told me that the mother body was made of cells from my body and cells of a certain insect combined. The biological weapons have been cultivated bit by bit, and this weapon has been tested and produced extremely effective results. She trembled all over and said, I know what the experiment he was talking about was. They released the pathogen and infected several small towns, causing tens of thousands of deaths. He is a complete devil. She hugged her knees and choked. He wants me to help him. He hopes to get more of my cells and promises that I will become the true god of this new era in the future. But, who will believe that? Who will help a father like that? We kept arguing until he tried to control me violently again, and the army came. Only then did I know that the people above had already known that my father was engaged in anti-human research in Vietnam. They sent me here this time to lure my father out through me. The army surrounded the base. The battle started, and many people died, until. She raised her head tremblingly and said. The situation was under control until my father rushed over, frantically trying to release the pathogen. At that time, as long as I killed him with that knife, he would not have the chance to release the pathogen, because he was already scarred in the battle, and I was so close to him. As long as I killed him, the following nothing will happen again. Her eyes trembled and she said. But I hesitated. I couldn't take action. The pathogen was released. The moment my father also released the pathogen, he was beheaded by the rushing master. When his head fell to the ground, he was still cruel. The earth smiles at me. Then, the plague broke out, and the corpses that died in that base became the best nutrients for the insect swarm. The entire base was in chaos, and everyone was running away frantically. There were screams, rapidly mutating insect bodies, and roars. But. Bai Chi turned her head palely, looked at Lin An tremblingly, and said. I know that I still have one chance to redeem myself. Before the insect swarm completely spreads out of the space, as long as I detonate the life wheel in my body and destroy everything here, there is still hope of redemption. As long as I detonate my life wheel. Wheel of life. She collapsed on the ground, tears streaming down her empty eyes, biting her lips and crying. There is still a chance to save it. Time passed by minute by minute. Lin. Chief Lin. Miss Bai Chi. Where are you? In the forest in the south, Yu Haoming's soldiers held flashlights and kept shouting to the entire forest. After Yu Haoming returned to Sanjiang town, he mobilized almost all the men in Sanjiang town and sent them all into the forest to find Lin An's whereabouts. During this period of time, sounds that made the entire land rumble and tremble were heard from the direction of the northern river. No one knew what was happening there at this moment, but they knew that if they didn't find Lin quickly, the terrible monster might really be coming. A soldier turned his head and looked at Yu Haoming's side face, and said tremblingly. Sir, is it possible that Master Lin An and the others have already? Yu Haoming slapped him across the face and shouted. Shut up! Don't you know what a powerful person Chief Lin An is? Find him. Even at all costs, we must find Chief Lin An. Yes. At the same time, on the north bank of Sanjiang, in the direction of Jianghai City. The sound of fighting is coming from the south. Quick! Let's go and take a look. It's very possible that Lin is there. On the road leading to Sanjiang, off-road vehicles and trucks carried a large number of soldiers in that direction, and countless helicopters flew in the sky. The support troops from all the major cities were already in place. After they eliminated the remaining insect swarms, they immediately followed the large troops south and joined the queue looking for Lin. Since Lin advanced the defense line for dozens of kilometers alone, the camera has never captured his figure again. On the internet, the topic of Lin's follow-up almost exploded to the top of the list. Everyone is guessing where Lin went. Why did he never appear again after repelling the insect swarm? Many people vaguely speculated that it was most likely that Lin encountered some bad situations after fighting off the insect swarm. Because even a god can never remain the same as a normal person under such terrible consumption. Angry cries from people online have grown louder. Where's Lin? Where's that godlike man? After he fought off the swarm of insects, you arrived too late. If anything unexpected happens to him, will you be worthy of yourselves? We want to see him okay. We want to see our hero okay. Public opinion on the internet is growing. Even in every major city, thousands of people gathered in the squares chanting Lin's name. Outside Jianghai City, the search for Lin reached the highest priority. No one wants to see that heroic man get into trouble, neither the people nor the authorities. On the way to the south, Wan Kao suddenly stood up from the Hummer, turned around and shouted, "Masters! Please prepare for battle immediately. The intersection of the three rivers is ahead, and we may have a tough battle to fight. Do you hear the sound in front? It must be Lin fighting with the insect mother." One after another of the off-road vehicles behind him, men with sharp eyes and terrible auras stood up. They are all masters. A top-level combat team sent by the Jiuzhu domain headquarters to encircle and suppress the insect mother. In Jianghai City, the master is the peak, but in Jiuzhu domain, the master is just a combatant who can be dispatched in batches. A few minutes later, the crusade team arrived at the north bank of the three rivers. But the next moment, their faces changed drastically. The river was scarlet, and the surroundings were full of traces of the battle. The forest was blown up, and countless cracks appeared on the ground. A very tragic battle had just ended here. What's going on? Wan Kao jumped out of the car and looked at the bloody river in shock. Why is the river red? A master frowned. In an instant, Wan Kao's face changed drastically, and he suddenly remembered what the group of Revengers in the overseas video said before. Could it be that the river has really been infected? Wan Kao's face was horrified, and he took a step back tremblingly. Hearing his words, the masters around him changed their faces instantly. And at this moment, the ground suddenly trembled violently, and they couldn't even stand still. And the next moment, they saw in great horror. In the dark night, a huge black shadow several tens of meters high broke out of the ground in the distant forest and made an extremely angry and sharp cry. Squeak! The next moment, the huge black shadow launched a charge towards the river. Every time it took a step, the ground shook like an earthquake. As hundreds of masters watched in fear, the huge black shadow suddenly spread its huge insect wings and flew to the other side of the river. But the next moment, a shocking scene appeared. The originally calm river suddenly turned into a sky-high wave at that moment. The scarlet wave seemed to stop the huge black shadow from crossing the river, and they collided heavily with it in mid-air. At the moment they touched, the huge black shadow let out a shrill scream. I can see the laws of things. Author, Yitiao Xianyue. Chapter 100. People were shocked to see that countless green mucus secreted from the body of the black shadow and fought against the bloody river water. Those who can become masters are all-powerful. They almost saw the clues at that moment. Insect swarm. It's an insect swarm, a master screamed tremblingly. All the masters subconsciously took a step back. That's right, whether it is the green mucus secreted by the black shadow or the bloody river water, they are all insect swarms constructed by countless tiny insects. This is a battle between two completely opposite insect swarms. They devour each other and fight each other. That black shadow should be the pathogen that brought the plague to their Jianghai city this time. The culprit who caused all these disasters, the mother of these countless insect swarms. But if it is the mother of this insect swarm, then what about the bloody insect swarm attached to the river water? All the masters took a step back tremblingly. They had a vague feeling that if they rushed forward, no matter which of the two insect swarms they faced, the result would be only one, and that was death. This creature was no longer on the same level as them. Didn't the intelligence say that the insect mother was only a level 4 regional beast? A master trembled. But this size and ability are definitely far beyond the scope of a level 4 beast. That's right. Although they vaguely felt that the insect mother seemed to have been seriously injured, especially half of its body was obviously like it had just grown out, and it looked very fragile, but its strength was still far superior to theirs. Such an insect mother, even if hundreds of their masters came together, it would be impossible to destroy it. But at this moment, they suddenly saw that the green mucus secreted by the insect mother on the river flow, under the attack of the scarlet water, only lasted less than a minute, and was instantly swallowed up by most of it, a crushing defeat. Even the insect mother had to retreat to the north bank again, far away from the range that the river could reach. It was actually afraid. It was defeated. How is this possible? A master looked at the scene in disbelief. The red worms in the river actually contained the worm mother. On the river, they completely devoured the green parasites released by the worm mother. But after the worm mother left, the river quickly returned to calm. It seemed that they were just following some kind of mechanized instructions to prevent the worm mother from crossing the river. As long as the worm mother stayed away, they would calm down. What is going on? Xuan Bei retreated in astonishment. A new swarm of worms suddenly appeared, and it was more terrifying than the swarm spread by the worm mother. But why did they stop the worm mother from crossing the river? Why did the worm mother want to cross the river so eagerly? What on the other side of the river made the worm mother charge towards the river again and again? It seemed that a line of defense had been formed here. Those scarlet worms seemed to be guarding something, using the river as a boundary to prevent any creature from crossing. Xuan Bei suddenly thought of something, his face turned pale, and he said, "The worm mother wants to go south. No matter what the reason is, it is heading away from our Jianghai city. But if it finds that it can't cross this river anyway, if it turns north." Hearing his words, the faces of the hundreds of masters turned pale instantly. Xuan Bei turned his head and looked at them, trembling. "Do we have the ability to kill this worm mother?" The answer is, no. Hundreds of great masters may be able to contain this worm mother here, and hundreds of legendary masters may be able to kill this worm mother easily. But in front of the worm mother, hundreds of masters are like ants to the blue dragon. There is a huge natural chasm between them, and this natural chasm will not be shortened because the worm mother is seriously injured. And the next moment, the scene that everyone was worried about appeared. The worm mother turned around and looked towards the distant north. At that moment, everyone's heart instantly fell into the ice cellar. Almost at the same time, in the southern forest, Yu Haoming looked at the live broadcast screen on his mobile phone, and his expression suddenly changed. Ever since Lin En appeared and defeated the dense swarm of insects, the live broadcast screen outside Jianghai City has always been the picture of soldiers clearing the fish that slipped through the net. But just now, when the camera focused in the air, he suddenly captured a familiar and terrifying huge figure. It's that monster." He took a step back tremblingly. It seemed that even the photographer suddenly felt a tremor, and people could clearly see that the camera trembled. The next moment, the entire network was instantly detonated again. Because there are still tens of millions of people watching the live broadcast, the huge black shadow that was accidentally captured just now instantly caused an uproar. What is that thing that the camera just captured? Quick! Quickly point the camera at the sky. It seems that something is coming towards Jianghai City. Quick! Quick! The hearts of the people in the entire Jiuzhou region were instantly pulled up again. The next moment, the camera suddenly turned to the southern sky. In an instant, people saw it. In the sky shrouded in moonlight, A huge black shadow more than 10 meters high was flying towards the direction of their camera, carrying a fierce wind. Everyone's faces instantly turned pale, and waves of tremors surged crazily in their hearts. What is that? What is that? The barrage under the live broadcast channel was detonated again, and the heart that had been relieved was instantly replaced by boundless panic again. The soldiers who were recovering the third and fourth lines of defense also saw the monster flying towards them in the sky. The forest beneath the monster withered and disappeared in patches. One after another, the soldiers retreated tremblingly, and the sweeping momentum almost instantly wiped out all the courage in their hearts. Quick, quick! An officer shivered and backed away. He suddenly turned his head and shouted at everyone. Retreat! Retreat to the second line of defense. Quick! Quick! They have already felt the huge sense of crisis, which is even more frightening than facing the attack of countless insect swarms. In the conference hall of Zhu Domain, Chen Daoming suddenly stood up, narrowed his eyes, looked at the live broadcast, and said, "The insect mother. The cause of all this." On the north bank of the bridge, Wang Dynasty North and others watched in horror the huge black figure heading north. He trembled. How could this happen? How could it become like this? Are we going to face an even bigger crisis after Jianghai City has just survived a crisis? Then what's the point of everything you've done before? The hundreds of grandmasters around him looked at his pale cheeks with trembling eyes and said tremblingly, "What should we do? There is no way we can be the opponent of that insect mother."